Giannis goes off for 43 and the Bucks lose by 6. They dropped to 2-8 after a 113-107 loss to the Boston Celtics. Things look good for the Bucks in the first half, but then the tide changed in the second half and the Bucks could not find a way to sustain a victory. We'll discuss what changed from the first half into the second, plus a lot more on the other side of the intro.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What it do? Welcome to Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical Foul podcast as well as the Pack-A-Day podcast. Joining me is Frank Madden, founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the pod. We appreciate you for tuning in, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every single day, especially after how these losses are piling up. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Plus, we're also in the newsletter form as well. Head over to lockedondaily.com and sign up for the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. It's your one-stop shop for Ultimate Team news and league news, so make sure y'all hop on that. Today's episode is also sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Frank, as I mentioned in the intro here, it's a tale of two halves for the Bucks. The first half was the best offensive half we've seen from the Bucks so far this season. It was the most points the Bucks have scored in any half this season with 69. It's the best field goal percentage they've had in any half so far, shooting 58.1%. They were up 11 points at half. One might point to that and say, if you were shooting that well, you should have been up by more than 11, but neither here nor there at the moment. The C's came out in the third quarter and they erased the 11-point lead quickly, like 3 minutes of time to erase that lead. They opened up the third quarter with a 12-0 lead, completely 12-0 run, completely erased the Bucks lead. And from that point on, it was a fight to the finish for the Bucks, and they just didn't seem to have enough. What stands out to you the most, Frank, from the first half to the second half in the Bucks' performance in this loss to the Celtics, which comes on the heel of another loss to the Knicks where you didn't see them really compete for a full game there?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the game logs, and I mean, the Bucks have had two good offensive games all season, and they've had two good defensive games all season, and they both coincided in the same games. It was the two wins, and so I think probably speaks a little bit to the fact that there's some interdependency there. When they defend at a higher level, the offense comes easier. We talked about all the transition baskets they got on Thursday night against Utah and how out of character it was for them to force so many turnovers. But every other game, it just feels like the defense is mediocre at best, and the offense can never pick them up. And it feels like inevitably, even in these games like today, which was a really competitive game against, the title favorite, the reigning NBA champions, losing by 6 against the Celtics. They got Jaylen Brown back today. I mean, on paper, there's nothing embarrassing about that, right? I thought the Friday night effort was bad,
Embarrassing.
On the second night of the back-to-back, like they were terrible. They didn't shoot well at all. And, in the second half, it just felt like they let go of the rope. And, it was bad. And we got another, Giannis post-game sermon, which it's like, how many of these are we going to get? So, I mean, it was better on Sunday. And, I thought they come out and get whatever it was, 16-2 lead, all 3-pointers, and Giannis attacking, going downhill, getting to the rim. Well, what changed? Well, in the first half, I think Giannis was like 4 out of 5 on, kind of 2-point shots that were not restricted area, right? Like mid-rangers, short turnarounds, things like that. Second half, he was 0 for 6. He's shot way more mid-rangers this season, and he shot them better. And so I don't like really pick on that, but that seemed kind of emblematic of the Bucks second half. Giannis settling for mid-range shots. They were not falling. And, the upside of him looking comfortable in the first half was that he got suckered into taking a bunch of them in the second half. And obviously they didn't go down. But obviously Giannis is the last guy that you'd point to as the problem in this game.
Right.
I think in general, just the offense, looked just so discombobulated in the second half. I thought Boston did a really good job, really pressuring on the perimeter. I think Friday and Saturday. I mean, that's probably the most rhythmless I've seen Damian Lillard look
Yeah.
shooting the ball from the perimeter. I think he was at one point he was 1 for 10 over the 2 games. I think he ended up like 1 for 12 or something like that on the weekend. And the one he hit was a prayer
Floater
hot potato. Yeah, like literally didn't even fist at his feet. Shot clock was running down. He just sort of like heads up, threw it up to the basket, and it goes in. But every other shot was a better look than the one he had on that one that he actually made. And I counted like 4 air balls in these 2 games. I mean, just no rhythm at all. And give the Knicks and Boston credit for really making a point of not giving him, the shots from 3 that he likes to get into. He got to the rim a bit in both games, but he just wasn't good enough. And I think him getting bottled up the way he was, I thought was emblematic of the way the offense just kind of ground to a halt in the second half. And there was that play in the fourth quarter when Dame and AJ Green both end up like in the corner when it was like supposed to be a dribble handoff with Giannis. I mean, just the spacing at times was just really bad. AJ Green saved that by just sort of like, all right, I'm just going to run to the wing, took a handoff and hit a 3. AJ had another really good shooting night, 4 out of 6 for 12 points. He continues to distinguish himself and, by default, right, is like a guy that you want to see on the floor now. But yeah, I just felt like the offense just got, I mean, we've talked about them kind of the math game has really been working against them. A game again today, Boston always makes you look at the 3-point differential and kind of shake your head. But the Bucks, their 3-point shooting has been a little bit down this year in terms of both the number of shots. I think they're about 20th, low 20s in terms of attempts per game. I think around 35. And they're kind of in a similar spot in terms of percentage. And, Boston, I think they were 19 of 50, which is pretty much average for them, right? It's not like they shot the lights out by their standard. And the Bucks shot really well early, but then as the game went on, they just got away from, the kind of shot diet that is how they had really good offenses for most of the Bud tenure and, the first part of last year. And there's just so many plays where it just felt like the ball gets swinging around the perimeter and guys just hesitate. They don't know what to do. I mean,
too hesitant.
There was like one possession where I think like 3 or 4 guys touched the ball in the last like 6 or 7 seconds of the shot clock, and everybody like took a beat and was like, I can't get a shot off, and it ends up with Taurean Prince in the corner
trying to make something happen.
Yeah, the last guy that like you want to having to be making stuff happen off the dribble. He shot the ball from 3 really well, but like I think that was like he traveled like literally like went up and down on it, and that was just like kind of the Bucks offense and the Celtics defense in a nutshell. So yeah, I mean all the Giannis attacking that the Celtics could handle as much as he put up his monster line, it just wasn't enough. And that feels like the epitaph on the Bucks first 10 games, just not enough, right? Not enough defense, not enough offense, and their whole just unfortunately expanded after finally a little ray of sunshine against the Jazz, but then they play 2 good teams, and again like they just at this point just are not at that level. And again, as much as they were competitive on Sunday, you just feel like, man, there's a long way to go for the Bucks if they're ever going to be able to compete with a team like the Celtics. But I mean, first off, they got to be able to compete with the Bulls and the Raptors and Pistons who are coming next week. Like compete with those teams, like show you so you can beat those teams first, because they've got a really home heavy stretch with some winnable games, and they absolutely need to start rolling off some wins, or again, like you just wonder, where is this season going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about the ball movement and how that slowed down, that's something that, of course, stood out. It's a common refrain, I feel like, in a lot of these Bucks losses, where you just see the ball offensively start getting stuck, or in situations it's like they're too selfless. And as you mentioned, they kind of hesitate when they have a good shot to take, thinking that there might be a better one out there. But like there has to be a certain level of aggression from the players on this team. And on top of that, too, just looking at it, I always look at the assists for Dame and Giannis as well as a little bit of a barometer as well, because first half, Giannis had 4 assists, Dame had 5. They both had 1 and one apiece in the second half. Like the ball movement just wasn't happening in the same way in the second half as it was in the first. Shout out to Giannis for dropping the 43 because that came for him with a hot start in that first quarter, 19 in the first quarter, had 8 in the second, only had 3 points in the third quarter before bouncing back in the fourth with 13 of his own there. So it was one of those games where offensively it was just 2 stop and start. And then defensively, especially in the second half, you saw some of those lapses coming back into play for the Bucks. And I actually have a question for you, Frank, around the Bucks defense, because I feel like since that Jazz game, we've been seeing them do a lot more switching defensively. And I want to pick your brains a bit on how you feel about switching, because sometimes I think teams switch just for the sake of switching. Other times you give it up too easily. And there are other times where it's like this was the right move to make. So I want to talk a bit more about the Bucks defense and how they've been utilizing switching when we come back after this. FanDuel. I love me some FanDuel because you can get in on the action with some great promos right now. If you bet $5 as a new customer with FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets if you win that bet. The FanDuel Sportbook app gives you everything that you need in order to place a live bet on the NFL, the NBA, whatever it might be, all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you're watching it, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and a whole lot more on the very same page that you place your bets on. So visit fanduel.com and join today. You'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. So make sure you head over to fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Frank, this Bucks defense and the switching. Like I said, the Jazz games, when I saw it, I was like, okay, they're switching a lot. And if I remember correctly, going into the season, switching was something that the Bucks weren't necessarily looking to do a lot of in this new defensive scheme. But we have heard Doc Rivers talk about how he's just searching for things. And hey, if this isn't working, back to the drawing board. We won't blow it up completely, but maybe we tweak along the edges here. So, like, how do you tend to feel about the switching that the Bucks are currently doing? Because they've been doing a lot more. And I feel like at times in this game in particular, like what the Celtics were looking for was that Dame matchup over and over again. And I feel like the Bucks conceded that very easily throughout the game. Just, hey, this is what we're cool with switching. And shout out Dame. I mean, he was putting in some effort there, but like the matchup against Tatum, that's not one you want to see your 6'2", non-defensive, known for defensive guard, I should say, trying to take up. So how have you been feeling about the Bucks leaning a little bit more into switching over the last couple of games?
Yeah, I mean, I think when, in the latter years of, Drew being here, we campaigned for them to switch 1 through 4.
Yep.
And it took a long time for Bud to be willing to do that, right? Like it was, I remember when PJ arrived in 21 on the trade, it was like we needed PJ Tucker to bully Bud into letting them switch more because they were so principled on, getting guys going over screens and that. And, I think there's a philosophical argument with not switching in the sense that when you force guys to go over screens, then you force effort basically. Like you can't just like wait on someone else to save you and wait for the help to save you. And I think it was interesting, in the first game of the season, they were kind of doing like hedging and recovering with Dame so that they wouldn't switch. Mm-hmm. And so again, like I think for a team like the Bucks that is old and slow, I think switching for a lot of guys makes sense. But it's a problem with Dame, and then it's a problem with Brooke because obviously Brooks, should just be dropping. Although I don't think that was really an issue today with as far as like Brooke switching or not switching or something like that. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I unfortunately I don't think there is no magical answer, one way or the other to the Bucks. And I think honestly, it's just they gotta, so often with defensive schemes, it's yes, we get fixated on scheme, and as fans, like we like kind of like I think sometimes they're like too quick to be like, the scheme is the problem. And it's like, I'd rather, execute the wrong scheme well than execute the right scheme in a half-assed fashion, if that
No,
makes
that's fair.
sense.
That's fair.
Um, and the personnel obviously matters. I think Friday I was really annoyed and just baffled at the decision to put Brooke on Cat
Same.
early. And there were a couple plays early, I think, where they had Brooke switch on the perimeter. Um, and I think you just sort of got into this worst of all worlds where you had Brooke switching on the smaller guys. You had him far away from the basket. Cat got downhill against him, which,
Mm-hmm.
like Brooke isn't meant to defend guys that far out. Or obviously Cat got free for three. So, after the game, Doc admitted it was the wrong strategy. I think he specifically cited they didn't want to put Giannis on the best player. I think they were thinking of it from like a, getting
Energy,
Giannis
effort
tired out.
standpoint. Yeah.
Exactly. But that was wrong. Like you
Mm-hmm.
needed Giannis in that role, and you needed to put Brooke on Josh Hart, or
Mm-hmm.
OG. Which again, like there's issues with doing that too. But Josh Hart shot 30% last year, 31% this year, 31% last year, 30%. Well, something like that, right? And he doesn't want to shoot a lot of threes. So I think this is something you kind of live with and let Brooke be close to the basket when you're playing Brooke. But obviously, you
Mm-hmm.
also don't need to play Brooke 35, 40 minutes. Either. But again, this is where it's just tough because you've got Brooke and then you've got Bobby Portis, and Bobby's obviously struggled more than anybody in
Mm-hmm.
terms of anything you look at defensively. The on-off numbers have been brutal with Bobby this year. So so it's again, I don't think there's necessarily an easy answer. I think the Bucks are always going to have challenges with Boston just
Mm-hmm.
because Boston plays the Jays at, essentially the 3-4 spots. And so Giannis, like who Giannis guards is always a bit of a question mark because you can't necessarily as easily hide him, which is why they usually put him on Drew, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a crazy way to kind of let Giannis roam basically by saying like, hey, Drew, like we're just going to concede that you're going to get some open threes. But obviously they've had some success doing that at various points of the last year and a half as well. So, so I think long story short, I don't know what the answer is. I think conceding the switch with Dame is not ideal, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you've got, especially if you're continuing to start Andre, who had issues today, and I think his offense really got exposed, and why we
It
didn't
did.
see him in the last, quarters because the Celtics basically decided they're just not going to guard him at all. I don't care. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're not worried about your threes. We're not worried about you getting around the
Doing
basket.
anything.
We're just zoning off you. And so that kind of, I think, highlighted something that we've talked about, like just at the highest level, like how big of an issue is that? Um, but yeah, it's just, I think the defense it's just a tough equation. And,
Yeah.
all told, like I don't even look at, the defense, I think Celtics were solid offensively, but not great by their standards. I don't think you really look at that as, what lost you the game per se today. I think, again, you just come back to the fact that you have two super elite offensive players, and night in and night out, your offense just is average at best most nights. And that's what, like, honestly, that's to me like the biggest failure / disappointment of the season. Like the
Mm-hmm.
defense has definitely has issues, but like the offense has far fewer excuses to be this bad. I know they miss Chris Middleton, but like you have to figure out a way to be better than like the 21st best offense in
Yeah.
basketball when you have Dame Lillard and Giannis. And again, like I know Doc Rivers and the coaching staff are thinking a lot about it, but like whatever answers they're coming up with are just not good enough right now.
Yeah, right now they're not. And to your point about rather seeing a team execute the wrong scheme at a high level rather than just coming in and just not giving the proper effort in another scheme, like that's the piece of it for me with the Bucks in particular, because you saw it again in this game, the ball watching, the over helping on defense, especially in the second half. Once the game started getting really tight down the stretch, it led to some open threes for the Celtics along the way. You saw them just being a little casual with the ball, whether that's how they were taking care of it, how they were attacking rebounds. There was one possession in particular where Giannis had the board coming to him and Derek Wright just rushes to the ball, kind of tips it out. last off of a buck, it's still Celtics ball. They have another possession at it. And just, you can't give good teams like the Celtics 2, 3 chances offensively in the same possession. Like, you can play good defense, but if you're not getting that board to secure the possession and end it, like, the defense is still kind of questionable. So like, you can see the flashes for the Bucks where it's like, hey, you got to stop, but they're not able to end the possession, which is the part that always drives us crazy. But Doc mentioned after the Knicks game, I think it was, just how a lack of effort, in the sense of, like, you see balls on the floor and you're just seeing guys walk to it, just not putting in what they need to execute and win the game. And you saw a couple guys this game getting on the floor. AJ Green was one of them in particular, who was really out there trying to hustle
A
for
couple
it.
times, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay, get on the floor then, AJ. You saw a couple times too with Andre Jackson Jr., his defense, Ryan Rollins, and some of the defense that he had in the fourth quarter down the stretch there. There are some things with the young Bucks in the rotation that are kind of interesting. And the Andre part that you brought up about his offense and how that allowed the Celtics to play off of him, I think it's worth exploring a little bit more. So let's do that after this message. If you need tickets to a sporting event, a concert, whatever the case may be, Game Time is going to have you covered. We're Locked On Bucks. We talk about sports, but Game Time doesn't only got you during sporting events. Like, they got it for all events. So if there's a show or a concert you're interested in, check out Game Time to see what the tickets are looking like there. Plus, they have this feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My personal favorite Game Time app is being able to see the view from my seat. I saw someone on Twitter earlier today at the Washington Commanders game who purchased his ticket elsewhere. The view from the seat did not match up with what he actually got there. So again, that's part of why I love Game Time, because the view that you see is this actual view you get in real life. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On NBA, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Okay, Frank. So some of the young Bucks. No Gary Trent Jr. today, should be said as well. No Chris Middleton, as it has been the case for this season so far. And the Bucks went with that 9-man rotation. 3 young guys found themselves firmly in that rotation, with Andre Jackson Jr. getting that start again, with AJ Green being one of the first guys off the bench, and then Ryan Rollins also being one of the guys in the rotation for the Bucks. And with having young guys in the rotation, sometimes you can see how they've been earning their minutes. You can see what they bring to the team and why you want to have them in a lineup. You can also see why they're young, and still trying to figure things out, and the kind of growing pains that comes with that. For Andre, it was that offensive piece of it a lot, and he had a couple of turnovers too that were just kind of baffling. But how the defense just deserted him completely. They just said, like you said, do what you want to do, Andre. We're going to focus on everybody else on this court over here. And when I saw the minute allocation with him only playing like 4 or 5 minutes in the second half, I was wondering if it was because of that hip pointer that he was dealing with over the last game coming into play. But after the game, Doc just said, no, it was the way the Celtics were helping off of him. Doc offered encouragement, of course, head coach trying to build up his player. It's just saying that Ajax has to kind of learn how and when to cut, how to open things up more offensively for the team, and that should come with time. He's not worried about that. You had Rollins, who, again, showed up in the fourth quarter with some really key plays there, but you also saw him in the first half not being able to stay connected to Peyton Pritchard through screens to properly contest the three. And even though some of that was on his teammates, I think it was like Pat Connaughton and Bobby was that big in the game at that time, didn't offer too much help for him in those situations, but he has to do a better job staying connected. And I think he did in his minutes in the second half as well from that. But you had AJ Green, as I mentioned, hustling on the floor for boards. You saw the bad spacing at times. I think just Dame and AJ must have the same idea on that play that you highlighted before AJ decided, I'm going to head to the wing and space this out a bit. But I think that kind of just comes with the youth aspect of it with the young Bucks. But again, I can see how they're earning their minutes. But for Andre Jackson Jr., we've talked about him needing to stop the fouling as much, understanding situational fouling and things of that sort, but also just how are they going to be able to use him offensively? I thought one way would just be kind of like the screener opening things up for some other guys, but this was a game in particular where screening for Dame in particular, where I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to get out of this because of the defensive matchup that the Celtics have. Like Drew's the guy starting on him, but you're screening and then you're getting Jaylen Brown on him, and then or you're screening again, you're getting Tatum on him. Where we've seen how bigger bodies on Dame defensively can kind of throw his rhythm off, and the Celtics just have a unique amount of good perimeter defenders on that team. But I think that next step for Ajax really is trying to find a way to use him offensively to be able to keep him on the court and not continue to mess up the spacing for the rest of the team.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the Bucks shot chart and not shooting enough threes, well, look at your starting five,
Yeah,
right? If your starting
yeah.
five is essentially taking last year's group and taking out Malik Beasley, who takes 10 or 11 threes per 36, and
Mm-hmm.
putting in Andre Jackson, who he'll get up a few, but if he hits 1 out of 3, you're happy with that. You're going to shoot fewer threes. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's just a
Yes.
reality, and your offense is going to get stuck in the mud sometimes because he doesn't want to shoot. And I think Doc correctly called out after the Utah game, right? Like his kind
Mm-hmm.
of connector instincts are very good. He's usually a pretty good decision maker as a passer. So when he has to pass, he's generally pretty good at it. Of course, he looks to pass, I think, just too much, and turns down shots at the basket because of that. But yeah, I mean, and that's why I think like thinking about the puts and takes of who that fifth starter is, it's a really extreme thing going from a Malik Beasley or a Gary Trent Jr.
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't shoot quite as many threes as Malik did, but is at least in the ballpark. And then going to a guy like Andre and AJ, I think of the guys who certainly were healthy today, right? Effectively, you swapped out AJ or Ajax for AJ in the fourth quarter, and AJ Green was the guy getting all those minutes. And again, I thought like defensively he competed, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't complain about AJ Green's defense. To me, I think you mentioned some of the hustle plays getting on the floor. We've seen him actually make like a couple of like help plays, like getting in passing lanes and stuff the last few games, which is kind of another step for him to be able to do that. Obviously, he's never going to be like Ajax or Ryan Rollins, right? A couple of plays that Rollins made just sort of coming out of nowhere to block shots today, but yeah, it's a tough philosophical question to answer, and I don't know, Camille, if you have like a kind of a clear answer for it. I think especially when you look at like games like these Raptors and Pistons games, I think your best bet is probably to start an AJ Green because again, like the opposing offenses aren't the uber elite type of groups that maybe you would want Ajax in there defensively for, and offensively just maybe you could hide Andre better against those teams like we saw against Utah. But man, like AJ Green is shooting the ball so well right now, and even if he's not shooting well, he's always going to stretch the floor and be a guy that you have to account for in a way that obviously you don't with Andre. So I don't know if you had a kind of feeling on it one way or the other at this point. I mean, I'm happy both those guys are at least like making an argument for why they definitely need minutes and why they each have at least a claim on a starter spot. But certainly a game like this also underscored why you need a healthy and normal version of Gary Trent Jr. back as well, because again, like you just look down the line on a day when Dame struggles, there's just not enough help.
Yeah. And this is a team that we've heard them say, we need to shoot more threes. We need to get more threes up. So to your point about how the rotation shakes out, first thing I'm going to say about that is just how you ended it. I'm glad that both Andre Jackson Jr. and AJ Green have found themselves in the rotation, because I think that that's right and how it should be.
And Rollins too, right?
And Rollins too, yes.
But he doesn't shoot either, right? He's not really taking shots either. So it's just another version of that problem.
I wonder for Rollins, though, if it's more so just kind of getting used to playing with the NBA team and just be like, okay, I need to figure out where my shots are. Because I think, I forget who mentioned it post game, but they're just saying like Rollins, if this was a G League game, I think he would have been far more aggressive looking for his shot, but thinks that he's still just kind of filling out what it's like to be with the main roster here. But when Andre was named the starter initially, I was shocked thinking that it would be AJ Green coming in to start because of that spacing aspect that he provides to the team, and thinking like if you're taking out a guard with Gary, it makes sense putting in another guard with AJ Green, leaving Prince and Giannis in as your forwards, going with Brooke at center, so on and so forth. But then you see Andre in that Jazz game, and you get like, it's the defense. I understand why you're doing it, trying to juice this up, but I think with Dre just being in the rotation, I don't know if I need him to necessarily start at this juncture, as long as he's still getting in his minutes as he has been over the last couple of games, at least 20 a game or so for Andre at this point. So I've been really pleased with AJ Green. He was someone over the summer too, who I thought come in and make a big impact for this team. And if this is a team that needs more threes, that's all AJ's been shooting this season at this point. And I believe he's shooting like near 60% from three at this point, which is absurd, given just how he's been able to knock some of these down. I mean, he had one tonight, it was like a sidestep three in the corner over Drew Holiday, where I was like, I think Prince got the ball to him too late. It could have been an easier shot, but he still made something out of it. So I want to see more of him.
What about the other option, Camille, which we kind of alluded to the other day too? I mean, I don't think there should be anything, sacred about Taurean Prince's role as a starter either. So I mean, the other option would be you could just start both Andre and AJ and put Taurean Prince on the bench. Again, I on the one hand, it's like I think Taurean's like kind of done his job to a large extent. I think he's got limitations from a foot speed perspective, covering quicker wings. Like I think Andre for sure, but AJ as well, I think moves laterally better than Taurean does. But Taurean's obviously bigger, longer than AJ for sure. But I think the problem is with Taurean is just, I mean, anytime you're asking him to put the ball on the floor, just like not good things are going to happen. For him. If you're expecting him to like have to use a crossover dribble to do anything, like he bungled a play trying to do that today. He's just really limited. And I think it's, again, on a team like the Bucks that is struggling to, score consistently and put together 48 minutes of good offense. It's hard when, you have guys like him who he can do something well. He's shot the spot up threes well. Yeah. But you ask him to do anything else, and he's not a movement shooter either, right? He's a stationary guy. So if you're mad about the Bucks like not moving off the ball and all that, which is a fair critique, Taurean Prince, that's not his game either, right? If you want movement shooting, AJ's your guy, right? Andre will obviously move. I don't think we've really seen him figure out like cutting as like a real weapon. Where, yeah. And again, that maybe also is partly a problem with his teammates and the Bucks offense not putting him in positions to do much. But obviously, like with him, he has to cut and be pretty much wide open for a dunk for him to actually like ever consider taking advantage of it either, right? Which is, again, kind of just part of his limitation. So we'll see. But I think, as you said with Rollins, I mean, we've seen it in summer league and preseason and stuff. I mean, he does have some offensive talent and an ability. He's not, I would say he's not like knockdown 3-point shooter. But I feel he feels very like, kind of trying to figure out which version of George Hill I should compare him to. Not the version that shot like 50% from three that one year, but one of the like, not the last version of George Hill, but the version of George Hill that defended well and was a pretty versatile defender, but like he just didn't want to take shots. Yeah, that's kind of what Ryan Rollins is right now. And again, I mean, he's basically DeLon Wright. It's basically what he is. I mean, like, like if DeLon Wright lost his job in part because he wasn't doing anything offensively, it's like, well, Ryan's really not doing anything offensively either. But, especially on a day like today, like his defense was impactful enough that I think he was a positive differential guy. And so, credit to him, right? He's getting an opportunity. And again, you just wish his offense would pop a little bit more and he would find a way to be a bit more dynamic offensively because, hey, it's cool that 3 young guys are playing, but like 2 of them don't do anything offensively,
They got to,
essentially.
yeah.
Which, for a team that is struggling offensively, like it's like, okay, like Andre, I know that's just kind of part of the it's like the Andre tax, but with Ryan, hopefully,
Yeah.
as you said, he can get a little more confident and figure out a way to get weaponized a bit more. Because we haven't, I don't know, maybe something we can come back to and talk to a little bit, but Bobby's shown some signs of life offensively. I think part of the concern with Bobby is just when you talk about the offense grinding to a halt, it's like so much of his game these last few years has been predicated on like ball stopping and settling for like mid-range turnaround jumpers, which when they go in, it's like, what a luxury. But when they don't, it's like just garbage offense. And, we saw when, I think in the third quarter, we saw like dueling banjos of both Bobby and Brooke, I think had quote unquote mismatches against Drew in the post, and they both settled for tough mid-rangers and missed. And, I think, I don't know, people always get so mad about Brooks defense. I think Brooks offense has been like way more problematic than his defense. Like the defense, yeah, there's always going to be situations, where matchups become an issue with him. But like by and large, like you look at the numbers year in and year out, like the Bucks defense is always better in the aggregate when he's on the floor and what he does from his rim protection perspective. But he's been so bad offensively. He did see a couple threes go down today, but I think he only had 6 points. Like he literally didn't do anything else. They have not figured out how to get him going from, around the basket, with the exception of like, there've been a few periods when like Giannis has sort of looked for some high-low stuff with him, but it just has felt like just a horrible offensive start for Brooke. Ironically, the offensive on-off numbers for him are fantastic, which makes no sense. But yeah, it just, with the offense struggling the way it is, and then you just say, like, man, we really need, Bobby to step up. We really need Brooke to step up. And then you look at the numbers and it's like, well, those guys just have made shots, and that's tough, especially because they're not playmakers either, right? They're not making other guys better when they're not making shots.
Even though Bobby is someone who's tasked a bit more with like, go ahead and get your own shot. A lot of it is through that ISO. Brooke is someone who relies a lot more on his teammates finding him and getting him the ball in situations. So there's a lot to work on for the 2-8 Milwaukee Bucks. Did not foresee them being here after 10 games to start this season. On tomorrow's episode, Justin and I plan on doing a little bit of a deep dive of the Bucks team currently after 10 games. Should be fun torture for those who are interested, and just seeing how poor
you're gonna need a hazmat suit to do that deep dive.
Prepare for that one, everybody, all the everydayers out there listening to that one. So, I mean, again, not where we thought they would be. Ironically enough, they are still 3 games out of third place if someone wants to try to find a silver lining for this team right now. But the Bucks are going to have to start getting some wins on their end to even justify continuing to look at that. So still a marathon, about 10 games in of the 82. So listen, time is starting to tick for this Bucks team. That hole that they've dug themselves in is getting bigger and bigger, and they got to start figuring out a way to fill that back in. But we'll end the show here I'll say this week. It's not this week. It's the first one of the week for us here at Locked On Bucks. We'll be back tomorrow with more Bucks takes, reviewing how this team is doing after 10 games on tomorrow's episode. So make sure you all keep it locked in to Locked On Bucks.